Hey there, and welcome to the Bold Badass Business Show. I'm your host, Dr. Barnsley Brown, and I am thrilled to bring you yet another badass, Drew Deraney, who has used his experience of difficulty and hardship and pain and turned it in to an exciting new business. And we're going to get into that a little later. But I really want you all to know that Drew is the creator of the Mindful Man movement. He's been a coach for a number of years. He is an author as well. He has a new book that you will see to his right, to his left, rather, up there. And Drew, I'm just thrilled to have you on the show. Welcome to the Bold Badass Business Show.
Honored to be here, Dr. Barnsley.
Well, we're going to have some fun and we're going to get deep. And, I think that this topic is really important because so often people say, why me? Why me? And we ask that question, right? Why me? Well, I like to say, well, why not me? Why not me? And I do believe that everything that happens to us is meant to serve us, but it's meant more widely to serve others. So, that being said, how about you just give everybody a little background on where you were in the last few years before you made the pivot? Just give us a little. I bet everybody's really interested for what the heck happened. But first of all, tell them where you were and what you were doing.
Absolutely. So excited to be here. Yeah. Let's see. We can go back to I did 24 years working in healthcare, not in the clinical setting, more in the procurement, strategic planning, business development, and finished my career in patient experience and patient relations. And there were a few other stops along the way. I worked in pharmaceuticals, broadband wireless, and I would say I've had a bunch of times where things happened. I'm going to give you the key one. Back in 2018, my divorce was final. And what's interesting is the last two hospitals I was at, I got fired.
Mm,
And the first one, when I was there, was when my wife left me. And
mm.
the second one, when I was there, the divorce was final. So if you do the math, it means during my times at both of those places, I was really trying to navigate saving my marriage and family. And a lot of times when men focus on one thing, we have a challenge focusing on other aspects of our life. So
Mhm.
my focus at work was waning and my productivity went down and I really wasn't myself. And that turned into Drew's doing his own thing. And the first firing didn't surprise me.
Mhm.
I was working in Manhattan, so it was a long commute and I had more on my mind. The second one was a little more surprising because I know I did the right thing and it happened. But
Mhm.
when it happened, there was still a weight lifted off my shoulder in a
Mm.
sense because it allowed me to focus more on getting my life back. So the divorce was final in April of 18. In October of 2018, that's when I got fired. Now, here's a couple key things. After the firing, I could live with that. There's other jobs.
Mhm.
10 days after I was fired, though, my son he was 14 at the time, had suicidal ideations. And he
Mm.
he was going through a lot, and a lot of it stemmed from the divorce. So we had an inpatient facility take him for about a couple months to help him out. And
Mm.
while he was up there, my father unexpectedly got sick and passed away. So
Mm.
in those 9 months from April to January 2018, 2019, kind of rocked my world, and I did not want to live anymore. I lost I felt I lost the purpose of my life, and it was a pivotal moment because as we'll talk about my book, it's about reformed people pleaser. It got me to realize that I was doing everything for everybody and really not taking care of myself because when all was said and done, after I helped my kids get through it, helped my mother get through it, I was a broken man on the other side because
Mhm.
now I was a man who my identity was based on my marriage and my family and my profession, and I had lost both, and my son and my dad. So I was in playing a really good game of the blame game. Um,
Mm.
It was my wife's fault for the divorce, my boss's fault for my firing, my fault for my son, and God's fault for my dad. When
Mm.
you live in a world of blame and victim mentality, it's a challenge to find what your purpose in life is. So that's where it all started.
Well, I want to pause you for a second
Yeah.
because you just said something that I think is pure genius, Drew. And that is when you are in blame mentality and victim mentality, then everything goes to, you didn't say it goes to hell, but
It does. It does.
it does.
It
You know,
does.
when we're in blame and victim mentality, nothing
Mhm.
can change, right?
Right. Right.
Nothing can change it.
No.
I just want to say to you, I just really appreciate that you just shared that you hit this moment in your life where
Mhm.
you didn't want to live.
Mhm.
And, you know, Drew, I don't remember if you and I talked about this, but I hit that point years ago when I was about 40.
Mhm.
And I just hit this, I'd just been betrayed by someone and all this other stuff had happened. And it was too much.
Right.
It was just too
Absolutely.
much. And I knew I wasn't going to hurt myself. I was real clear on that, but I was just like, I don't want to be in
Mm.
this shithole.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. There is a difference, Dr. Barnsley. You're right. There's a difference between I don't want to live anymore versus I want to kill myself. Right.
Exactly.
I didn't have a plan. It was one of those things where I wanted to be on a deserted island by myself for a few months without anybody bothering me, kind of
And
thing.
just your little skeleton head, like, or
That's it.
basketball, like Tom
Yeah.
Hanks, right?
Yeah.
Be the
Exactly. Yeah.
basketball that you can
Mhm.
put the, whatever
The smiley face or
use the
whatever.
Sharpie
Yeah.
to make it happy or sad.
Absolutely.
Wow. So
Mhm.
when
Mhm.
your son
Yeah.
got this suicidal ideation,
Mhm.
and he was like 14, and gosh, we know this is happening to so many young people.
Yeah.
I mean, it is happening to so many young people. I could name off 4 right now on my hand
Yeah.
who I know are in my family, or
Mhm.
in my family of choice. And so when this happened, you're a man, you're a father,
Mhm.
right? You were a provider and a
Mhm.
husband, and you kind of just lost it. The only thing left was father, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
lost being a
Absolutely.
son when your dad died. You know.
Mhm. Yeah.
So tell us what got you through that time. How did you get
Hmm.
through?
I guess getting through that time, I did what men are taught to do in our society, and it's suck it up, man up, no, don't show emotions, be the rock, be there for everybody else, plow through it, and just do it.
Yeah.
And even though I'm a very authentic, empathic, compassionate individual, it does challenge me to self-advocate, ask for help, because I'm the one who's the one always there to help people. So I just, through adrenaline and just doing the right thing, I just didn't even think. It was just just take care. And when the dust settled and things were not they'll never be normal, but they were kind of copacetic, um, I felt empty inside.
Mhm.
And that emptiness, and I had always wanted to run my own company, and I never did because my dad was an IBMer for 35 years and then worked another 12 somewhere else. And I was taught the linear path in life, and I followed the linear path in life. You do A plus B plus C, and D is going to happen. Well, Drew did all the right things
Mhm.
from grade school to high school, college, graduate school, got my MBA, married, kids, and I'm in this position. So
Mhm.
I was like, I'm sick of this. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm tired of there's a difference between being nice and being kind, but I was tired of being nice and like just taken advantage by the wrong people, because you can be nice to the right people and you're fine. You can be
Yeah.
nice to the wrong people and you're taken advantage of. So I started to do some research on why men allow their entire life to fall apart when one thing goes wrong. Because basically, I looked at the difference between men and women, and most of the women I knew, if one part of their life went south, they were able to keep the other 7 or 8 parts of their lives kind of like status quo while they fixed the other. And I wanted to know why. And really asking women in my life what is their superpower, It's that they're not afraid to go to their girlfriends and say what's going on and tell
Yes.
and men are taught not to do that. So
Yeah.
like men, we'll address the symptom. We'll go to the bar and drink with our friends, hoping after the hangover our issues will be gone, and they're not. Women, you talk to your friends and you get beneath the surface and dig to the core issue and you work it together and things get better. So I realized after looking at some data, learning that tears have toxins in them for a reason. So when you cry, you release toxins, yet men are taught don't cry. So we're taught to suppress those toxins. Then if you ask for help or you share your story, you release emotional toxins. Well, men are told not to do those two things either. So we suppress those. So in essence, by listening to society, men are choosing to die younger. you know,
Yes.
right?
And
And
they
if you look,
do.
they do. And then if you look at the lifespan in the US, the average for the women is like 79.1 and men 73.2. That's 1996 numbers, largest gap since 96. And what does that tell us? It basically tells us that we're dying younger because we are not taking care of ourselves, because it may be an ego thing, but we don't cry and we don't ask for help. That's
Mhm.
what got me over it, because I started writing my book during that time, because I always wanted to write a book and I never had content. Now, God knew I had content now, but
Yeah.
I did it through Zoom with my editor because it was during COVID. And so I would tell my story to anybody who would listen. And as I told my story, I started to heal myself from within. It was
Mhm.
cathartic. It was hearing it. I'm like, this, I'm saying to myself, wow, you went through a lot and you got through this. And I started building my confidence just by hearing myself speak. And I figured if I can do it, then other men can do it. And that's how I started the whole mindful man movement. And it's all about, yes, we can still be the man from the caveman times and provide and take care of and all that, yet we can still be empathic and compassionate and still be strong. It's not a weakness. So strength with empathy. And so I started coaching on self-discovery, because I started to get to know who Drew was and started to love myself instead of regretting the past and fearing the future and getting pissed at myself for decisions I made when I was younger. So that's basically how the whole victim and blame thing kind of dissipated. I was tired of being that.
I love it. I actually, there's so much to unpack in what you just shared. One of the things that I was thinking about is that I heard a wonderful saying that women have relationships that are face to face,
Mhm.
and men have relationships that are side by side. So think
Bingo.
about it like watching the football game.
Mhm.
And women,
Mhm.
we like want to look in each other's eyes and we want to
Yep.
connect and all of that. And men, it's like a side by side.
Yep.
And
Mhm.
it's interesting too, Drew, and I think that's true to some extent. We're socialized that way. But as
Mhm.
you were talking, I also very much feel a lot of what you said. Like
Mhm.
I, as a single mom, I'm the one who's got to, I've got to hold it all together.
Mhm. Yeah.
And sometimes I ask, who's holding me together? And I know
Mhm. Right. You
that's
need you
upstairs,
need
right?
you need that
I
higher
think
power.
we
Yeah.
do a little bit of a better job.
I know. I can't reach the
We do
rope.
a
I
little
get
better
below it.
job.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
But, it is something where, I think it's in our society,
Mhm.
we can have this buck up buttercup attitude, especially after somebody loses someone
Right.
dies, like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, get back to work in 2 days, do this, do that. And
Mhm.
and I think it is so powerful when we have leaders like
Mhm.
you, and we have
Right.
male leaders and we have female leaders who
Mhm.
are strong women,
Absolutely.
sharing our emotions and being real about what goes on in life, because it's not always this posturing we see up on Facebook.
Oh,
This
absolutely.
like
Absolutely.
everything's fine. I'm
Mhm.
fine. Yay, I'm fine. A lot of people are not fine.
No.
And a lot of people are hurting. A lot of people are
Mhm.
holding it back and putting it, just saying to themselves, I'm just going to get through this. I'm going to get
Mhm.
through. And it's so important, I think, to be constantly asking ourselves, how am I?
Yeah.
How am I really? What
Mhm.
am I feeling? What am I feeling? And why and how can I give myself some joy today,
Right.
especially when I've got some hard circumstances,
Mhm.
right?
Very
Everybody's
true.
got some hard circumstances, but how can I give myself some joy
Mhm.
and some pleasure today that makes this life worth living? And how can I
Absolutely.
serve other people and make my
Mhm.
life worth living? So I really appreciate your honesty. And
Mhm.
those of you listening, I would love for you. We've already gotten some hearts and some thumbs up, but I'd really love to hear if you've ever had a situation where you were like feeling like you're hanging on by a thread and just share because I believe it happens to all of us. Some people, like you point out, Drew, will just stop at the bar and try to numb it out,
Mhm.
or numb it out with relationships, intimate relationships, or numb it out with something else
Right.
instead of really looking at what's there.
Yeah. True. Very
So
true.
you basically had all the shit hit the fan in
Mhm.
the space of like 2 years.
Yeah, basically. And then, things started to turn around. And then the most recent pivot, why it says caregiver coach up there, is my oldest son, who's 22 now. He's got autism spectrum disorder. What they say is call it high functioning, which I don't like that
Mhm.
term because that means the others are low functioning. No, but
Yeah.
he's Asperger's. It was level one, so highly cognitive and socially and emotionally delayed. And the next pivot, if you'd like me to discuss that, because you're kind
Yes.
of telling me where it was. So when my father passed away, my oldest son, who was 17 at the time, was working at Stop and Shop, doing well. Um, my father and he were like best friends. My dad would drive him to work, pick him up, all that. My dad got sick. My son quit the job to be at the hospital.
Mm,
And when my dad passed away, my son, for the first time in his life, he felt depression and grief.
mm,
So an emotion, we thought he had flat affect and all that kind of stuff. Turns out it took my dad passing for him to feel something that we've probably felt our whole life, but so I was with him during that first, and then COVID hit and he lost all his accommodations at school with his IEP and he's stuck in front of a computer to finish high school.
mm.
I helped him do most of his homework, and so did his mother and her boyfriend. And then trying to go to college after that, it was still all remote, and he started feeling anxiety and stress for the first time in his life. So with all of that, a few years later, he was investigating different things instead of doing prescription medication. He was looking into psychedelics. Found a doctor who did ketamine, who prescribed ketamine legally, whatever. And so we investigated him. We found somebody whose kid had gone to him, so we went to him. My son did 6 treatments of ketamine. The depression came to the surface. We went to his therapist, whatever. We worked some stuff out. So a lot of the trauma was being dealt with. He was getting better, and then 2 years later, the depression was still there, and he asked to go to for one more treatment. And
Mm.
my son had lost 147 pounds in those 2 years.
Wow.
Basically starving himself because he was a
Mm,
stress eater. He was heavy and bullied and stuff in school. So he lost that weight. We go back, and the doctor had mentioned about having to readjust the dosage because of his weight loss and didn't. Kind of overdosed my son. And this was July of last year, 24.
mm.
And till September of 21, my son had psychosis and dissociated a lot. And he tried to cut himself, tried to kill himself. So here we go again. Finally, an emergency visit, injected with Haldol, broke the psychosis, and now my son's doing a lot better. But it was because of that in July when I stopped working completely,
Mhm.
and because I work 3 feet from the base of my bed, my son needed me all the time, and I was like, I don't want to split my time or energy or money on work. So I stopped, and my mother's helping me with the bills, and I'm with him now, and we finally found the best community of therapists, a new psychiatrist, a life coach,
Hallelujah.
people at the college that he's trying to go back to, and he's taking voice and piano lessons, and he's thriving. And I realize it's a passion for me because I'm navigating the system trying to get him help, and it's so hard to
Mhm.
find services for neurodivergent individuals from 18 to 25. And so I'm like, forget this. I want to help families. So I'm turning to I'll add it to my toolbox to be a caregiver coach where I can support and advocate and guide and connect families with special needs and the caregivers with the right people. because so many people out there are not sharing that they have something. And you can't tell my son has it because I'd say the quote unquote high functioning, I don't call it a disability. I hate that word too, but you can't tell.
You can't tell from looking at him or being
No,
around him. Yeah.
no.
It's an
So
invisible, quote
it
unquote, disability. And
is.
yes, and so many people, I'm so glad we're talking about this because so many
Mm,
people have invisible, quote unquote, disabilities, as they call it,
absolutely.
right? Like
Absolutely.
ADD, like
Hmm.
ADHD, like
Hmm.
depression, like anxiety or panic attacks,
Yeah.
um, autism spectrum. I
Right.
mean, so many, or developmental delays,
Yeah.
dyslexia. I mean, you
Well,
know,
even my middle guy, my middle guy has Crohn's.
oh wow,
Yeah, on top of all that other stuff. So that was another thing we had to navigate during the marriage. So it was, yeah. So many things are on the inside, and people don't. It's okay to tell people. It's not like you're feeling bad for yourself. If people know, then the compassion comes back to you, and that makes you feel better.
right.
So yeah,
And it's okay for people to see that at the moment, we're not okay.
right,
You know,
exactly.
and,
Mhm.
and at the moment I'm not okay, just to
Mhm.
speak it. But I think it's so hard in this society, and it's also hard for entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
because entrepreneurs, we're supposed to be the go-getters and
Mhm.
having initiative,
Yeah.
etc. We're the ones who are self-starters and
Yeah.
all of this. But when stuff's going on that is knocking you for a loop, it can be very, very hard
Mhm.
to focus. Drew, I recently was diagnosed with ADD. All right,
Okay.
not
Mhm.
ADHD.
Okay, got you.
I don't
Mhm.
have the hyperactive part, but ADD. And the psychiatrist who diagnosed me, I was so happy.
Mhm.
I think she was like, "What's going on?" I said, "No, I'm happy because it explains a lot."
Yeah.
And I'm trying to educate myself. I
Mhm.
know that I've really developed some really good coping mechanisms,
Yeah.
or I never would have gotten where I've gotten in my
Yeah.
life.
Absolutely.
Like, I have developed some really good coping mechanisms, and
Right.
even in graduate school, I
Mm.
developed these. Because I was different. I always knew I was different, but I didn't
Mhm.
understand exactly how.
Right.
And, I think these kinds of conversations like what we're having right now,
Mhm.
they normalize the issues that so many people have, right?
Absolutely.
They normalize it. And
Yeah.
so many young people have had this, had depression. And
Right.
for some of them, it happened after COVID.
Mhm.
It really
Yes.
hit after COVID.
Mhm. Mhm.
Suddenly we've all been kind of cut off from each other, and then we're
Yeah.
supposed to reintegrate
Mhm.
into those things we used to do, and that can be very tough.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. There's a whole generation now who don't know how to have conversations face to face.
Right.
And also the isolation. You don't isolate human beings. Human beings need
It's not
connection.
healthy.
No, and then social media rampant. They're calling people friends who they never even met before because they're, I don't know. Yeah, it's a travesty. And I don't think we're going to find the ramifications for another few years as people get into adulthood. Some of the
Yeah.
youth, and yeah. Yeah, you know what? I don't know. I just I want to help as many people as I can. But it's interesting. I would do everything for free. The stuff I'm doing. But then
Well,
the bills come in the mail. I'm like, okay, now what do I do?
yeah, you can't do that. So am I. I'm such a helper, right?
Yeah,
I'm such a helper. I love to help. I love
yeah,
to help people. And the thing is that some entrepreneurs are like, well, I shouldn't accept money for XYZ because I'm really helping them
mhm,
and they really need the help, etc. But you got to think about this: is you will not have a sustainable business unless you are willing to
mhm,
know your value and
yeah,
to receive that value through barter or money or whatever currency you
yeah,
decide.
absolutely.
We have to stand in our value, and we also don't want to make beggars of another person,
Nope.
because when people are invested
Mhm,
in something changing, whether
mhm,
that is their mental health or their business growing, in my case working with people, or their mindset changing so their business grows,
right.
and then we've got to really stick with that, right?
Mhm.
We've got to stick with it and be willing to change and grow, to get
Mhm.
out of the comfort zone. Um, so what were some of the questions that you asked yourself, Drew, when you were going through this pain? And
Mhm.
I know that I actually gave you the name the caregiver coach. I'm like, why don't
Yep.
we call you the caregiver coach? Because it's
Yep.
perfect.
Yeah.
It's so much better. There are advocates now
Mhm.
who are advocating for people going through all sorts of procedures.
Yeah.
But the caregiver coach is so important because the people who are caregivers are burned out,
Absolutely.
just
Absolutely.
absolutely burned out.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's true. And I come from the healthcare field, and I would work closely with the nursing staff, and I support nurses 100% because I would talk to them about caring for the caregiver.
Mm.
And that's why when I told you about that, you came up with caregiver coach. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I basically coached the caregivers when I worked in healthcare because being on the floors and seeing what they go through, I would teach them some coping mechanisms, but in between going to see patients, because they needed to fill their bucket up before they went into the next patient. So it's important we do care for the caregiver, because it's just like that analogy on the airplane. When they tell us to put the oxygen mask on
Mhm.
ourselves first before we help people, it makes sense, because if we don't and we can't that we die because we have no oxygen, then how are we helping people? So it makes
Exactly.
sense. It is easier said than done. When you're somebody who likes to just help people. But yeah, I got to start taking care of myself. Self care is so important. You know.
Yeah, I like to suggest that people make a list and call it your bliss list.
Mm,
And it's just stuff that you enjoy that brings you a little piece of bliss. Doesn't have to be big. It could be a
mhm,
cup of hot chocolate with some little mini marshmallows in it. It could be writing um, mad, sad, glad pages like they do in
mhm,
the artist way.
mhm,
I'm mad because I'm sad because I'm glad because. It could be taking a little walk outside or playing with your animals, could be calling a friend, it could be going
mhm.
to a 12-step group to get some support or going
Yeah.
to group therapy. But, you know, there's just a lot of instability right now, Drew, and
Yeah.
there really is in a lot of people. I see it, and I think all of us are kind of shaking a little bit in our
Yeah.
in our in our feet, just kind of
Mhm.
shaking with a lot of changes happening in the
Yeah.
world,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
wondering, how are things going to turn out? How can we deal with inflation with our businesses? How
Right.
can we keep our businesses
Mhm.
going? And um, you know, people are getting laid off and fired and
Mhm.
everything else. And what are they going
Mhm.
to do? Those
Absolutely.
people who don't have the entrepreneur mentality because they've been employees their whole life. This is such
Mhm.
a different animal, becoming an entrepreneur. And it's why I
Absolutely.
always say to people, get support, get
Mhm.
coaches who are doing what you want to
Yep.
do.
Absolutely.
Get that support.
Absolutely. Mhm.
Make sure you have access
Yeah.
to the particular person and you're not just going through somebody they hired.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
You wanna go to people. That's something else I used to do, which was a weakness. I wouldn't go to people who are an expert in that thing. It's kinda like going to a carpenter for plumbing advice. I would go to my family, which
Mm,
they meant well, but they do it their advice would be, to protect me, so you
safety.
don't go out of your comfort zone, safety. So I've
Yep.
learned, even in entrepreneur, I've hired the wrong coaches. But you know what? The key thing is you need to find out what your purpose is. Once
Mhm.
you know why you're doing what you're doing, and you learn, how to do it and all that kind of stuff, you learn the how to do it a lot of times from a coach who's been through it. That's
Yeah.
why I even like the term mentor better than coach, only because mentors usually ones who've gone through what you've gone through. But there are special coaches like yourself who, like, so there's so many coaches popped out of the woodwork after COVID. Everybody just like made up, oh yeah, I'm a coach. You gotta be careful.
Well, it's
Make
been
sure.
happening for more time than that. It's been
Yeah.
happening for
Yeah.
over a
Mhm.
decade, and I always
Yeah.
like to clarify with people, look, there are all these coaching certifications, et cetera, and you can do that, or
Mhm.
you can have the School of Hard Knocks. And
That's
I don't have a
uh,
coaching certification. I have the
yeah,
School of Hard Knocks of 24
uh-huh.
years of business, growing my business
Oh,
bit by
yeah.
bit. I'd
Yep.
much rather have that. Martin Brossman, another fabulous
Mhm.
coach, and I have this conversation a lot, and we do business seminars all over, but
Mhm.
we have the real world experience. And that's a very
Absolutely.
different thing. You know, when you talk about mentors, I think
Yeah.
mentors are great too. The difference between the coach and the mentor is the mentor isn't paid. And so what I've found is I have
Mm,
mentors,
mhm.
but I feel bad about asking them tons of questions. But my coaches know because I'm paying them.
Yes, yes. Yeah, there is definitely a distinction, and I believe you need to have both
Yeah.
simultaneously,
Yes.
simultaneously, who are each aligned with what you believe in. I say I stand by integrity, so I'm going to align myself with a coach and a mentor who's got integrity,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's important. Yeah, yeah, it's
So much
yeah,
with it. There's so much happening that where there isn't, and like you said, you've hired some of
mhm,
the wrong coaches. I have seen
yeah,
so much fallout with my
yeah,
clients where they've
mhm,
run up huge bills and they've gotten no results with
yeah,
people they've hired, and
mhm.
it's really disappointing. It's just disappointing, and
It
it
is,
for
yeah,
me, it kind of takes coaching and, brings it down to, like, slimy
mhm,
salespeople selling
yeah,
cars, we
mm,
yeah, I don't like that at all. I want results for my people, and
absolutely,
they get them, and
yeah.
that's what we've gotta give people. So,
Mhm.
some of the questions, it sounds like some of the questions you asked yourself, are, "Why is this happening?" Um
You know what? I didn't ask why this is happening. I when I played the victim and blame game, I didn't even think why. I realized though that I was really a pushover a big part
Mm,
of my life. I had a lot of control with the results that happened to me that I say I don't regret anything. I just didn't have the tools at the time to make different decisions. I created the situation I'm in right now.
mhm,
And when you think like that, you look in the mirror. I always at the hospital would tell people about the window versus the mirror mentality and the accountability. It's easier to look out the window and be judgmental of what you see out the window than it is to look in the mirror and be judgmental of what you see in the mirror. So I believe in the mirror accountability. So when something happens, what could I have done differently in that situation should it happen again, where I may not change the outcome, but it could change the means to get to the outcome. And
mm.
there are a lot of things in my marriage I could have done differently, but it takes two for a marriage,
Yes, it does.
and I could have done stuff differently in my job, and it takes two for a boss and an employee, and the same thing with a child and a father and a son, and all that. So I don't know. When you look in the mirror and when you're accountable for your own behavior, you take the blame and the victim mentality away, and you have a lot more control over your life.
Mm,
Yeah. So those are the questions I ask myself: is what can I do differently? Why don't I feel good?
mhm.
What makes me happy? What makes Drew happy? Not what do other
Yes,
people say we should do, right? So I asked a lot of questions so I could remove the should, supposed to stuff that I would be
the
hearing
have
from people.
tos.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
I
those
love
are
that.
most of the
Remove the
questions.
have tos, remove the shoulds, remove which are really the societal scripts or the
Of
scripts that
course.
we get from
Yeah.
education, from family, from church,
Mhm.
from all
Mhm.
these things,
Everything. Yeah.
politics. We
Yeah.
get the shoulds and the have
Mhm.
tos, this is how it's supposed to
Mhm.
be. And,
Mhm.
really we have to chart our own course.
Absolutely.
Chart our own course and decide,
Mm.
what am I committed to? And
Mhm.
Drew, I decided, like, I cannot think of a time, I'm
Mhm.
just gonna say this, that I saw my mother really cry.
Okay.
Like, I cannot think right now of a time that I've seen her really break down and cry.
Mm.
And even when I told her that my brother had passed 5 years ago,
Oh,
her response was, "What a waste of a life." That
wow.
was her response. Okay. She
Wow.
just wasn't in touch with her feelings, okay?
Mm.
Because
Mm.
that was her generation, and
Mhm.
then she got so upset, she went and she vomited. right? I was like, Mom, aren't you going to cry? And she got up so upset she went and vomited. But she was not allowed to express her feelings.
Right.
She was raised in a very, upstanding family, but they did not express their feelings.
Okay.
And so I came along this really empathic, sensitive kid. I was always like, God, I'm the crybaby. But I'm so grateful. I'm kind of the person who introduced hugging in my family when I was a teenager. And I'm the person who started to tell my mother that I loved her. I tell my daughter all the time. I probably tell her so much it annoys her, in fact. But I made a decision to be vulnerable, more vulnerable than I had seen in my family.
Yeah.
And I can tell that you've made that decision. And the fact that you've made it as a man is even more courageous. So what would you say to people listening who are afraid to, that if I feel my feelings, I'm just going to get carried away. What will I do? I'll just move into deep depression, or they're just scared of it. What would you say?
Form boundaries. I didn't have boundaries. And what I mean by that is why I mean men can be strong and empathic is I believe my self-identity is measured by the amount of respect I have for myself, the amount of love I have for myself, and the amount of trust I have for myself. So if I don't trust myself and I don't respect myself and I don't love myself, confidence is low. So my self-identity is not going to be based on who I am. It's going to be based on other stuff outside. So I believe that you need to build up that strong self-identity, those non-negotiables, so then you're comfortable going out, being comfortable in your own skin, and going and going to help people, but you're not going to allow them to diminish who you are. So you have to have that boundary to protect your self-identity and still be empathic. Still let them penetrate your non-negotiables. I never allowed myself to have non-negotiables. I would always bend and break and say, okay, I'm doing it for them. And I wasn't doing it for myself. So I'd say at least have 3 non-negotiables in your life that no matter what you're doing, you don't change that.
I love that. Okay, I'm putting this into the chat, actually. I realized I put some of this into the private chat, so I had to move it over. But I put, do you respect, well, y'all can change my spelling. Yeah. Do you respect, trust, it's respect, trust, and love yourself? Wow, those are important questions to ask ourselves. It makes me think of the 4 agreements, and my word is law, having that kind of commitment to what we say, following through. Even when it's about ourselves, and then have 3 non-negotiables. So what are some of your non-negotiables in life and business that you could share with us? I think this will be really helpful for everybody listening. And those of you listening, think about what are your non-negotiables and pop them up in the chat.
Yeah. In life, I need to surround myself with people who are good human beings, and I measure that based on integrity, honesty, and transparency. If I ask you a direct question and you don't give me a direct answer, I'm gonna, that's gonna be a red flag. I would say, business-wise, if you're not willing to offer to help me without saying how much it's gonna cost, because there are things there are times you need to differentiate between, charging for this versus this person needs this and they can't have it, and I'd rather them come to me than find somebody out there who's gonna not help them. So, I'm able to now weed out the narcissists in my life. I can sniff a narcissist miles away, and I don't let him or her into my community. And if you're aligned with, I mean, I'm into integrity, respect, authenticity, all that. You can tell when people aren't like that, and so to me, that's a non-negotiable. I even had someone say that, Drew, you got to find ways of getting what you need without spending a lot, spending the money, of like trading services and stuff like that. And I said, well, you just bought me a cup of coffee. She goes, yeah, but this is my husband's card. I'm like, that one rubbed me the wrong way. And I'm like,
Mm.
that didn't seem right. So you have to listen. We have to listen more than you speak. We have two ears and one mouth for a reason. The more we listen to other people's pain points, the more that we don't allow us to be swayed by somebody else. I just I learned to listen a lot better. But my non-negotiables, yeah, you got to be a good human being. I mean, even on my podcast, I told you this. You have to be three things. You have to be a good human being. You have to be in business for something that there's a need for, and you have to be unique in some way, shape, or form that makes you stand out from the other people who do what you're doing. Those are
Mhm.
my three criteria to come onto my podcast, and that's a non-negotiable. So these are just some examples I can think of right now.
I think it's important to think about what those non-negotiables are. And I know for myself, a non-negotiable is working with people who aren't just working for money, but they're working because they want to give more,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
So it's not just about the bank account, that we absolutely track their profit,
Mhm.
we track their
Mhm.
we celebrate their
Absolutely.
changes and the momentum we're creating.
Mhm.
We celebrate it, and we celebrate what we're able to share
Mhm.
because of it,
Yeah,
because there's
absolutely.
no reason to soar into six figures or more unless you're going to give
Yeah.
and share it with others.
Mhm.
There's just
Absolutely.
no reason. Happiness doesn't come from only getting ourselves the Louis Vuittons and the this and the that. Happiness
Right.
comes, I believe, from knowing that we've made a difference, a positive
Yeah,
difference for someone else. And that
absolutely.
someone might be an animal, it might be a kid, it might be a plant. I mean, but we've made a positive difference. And so that's a non-negotiable, is that my people are big-hearted
Mhm.
givers.
Mm.
And also a non-negotiable in my program is that they've got to be willing to do the work,
Oh, yeah.
because I
Mhm.
can guide, I can support, I can do all those things that I do, but they've got to be willing to show up and do the work,
Yes.
because it just can't be done for us. It
Mhm.
can't only be done for us. It can be done with us,
Absolutely.
but they got to be willing to show up and
Abs
do it and get out of comfort zone. So
Mhm.
those are
Mhm.
non-negotiables for me. And I would say in my relationships and friendships, a non-negotiable is that I want to be around generous people who
Mhm.
are generous with their time, their
Mhm.
energy,
Mhm.
maybe their money, but they just have a heart of generosity.
Yeah.
And that's very important to me. So those of you listening, we're just talking about non-negotiables, being really clear in your life and your business what your non-negotiables are, because that is setting up parameters and, you know, even your policies, right? These are there to prevent you from having pain, right?
Mhm.
So some of the pain we can prevent in the future. It is a good
Yep.
question, how can I do this differently next time so I don't have
Mhm.
a problem?
Absolutely.
So Drew, what would be a final message that you'd want to give everybody listening, about turning your pain into a pivot that makes a difference for others?
I would say make a conscious effort and choose to write your own story
Mm,
instead of letting others write it for you. Because if you stand by the sidelines and don't self-advocate, somebody else is gonna write your story for you, and
mm,
it's not gonna be your story. And you're gonna be on your deathbed with a ton of regrets, and you don't want that. So think now what your regrets would be should you
mm,
die tomorrow.
mm.
Look at those regrets and determine if they're within your control to address them or out of your control. And do something about take massive action on the things that are under your control so you limit the amount of regrets you have on your deathbed. That's what I'd say.
All right, so I'm putting that up here. I put mic drop. If you died tomorrow, what would your regrets be? And then ask how to change them, like how to
Mhm.
circumvent them. How powerful is that? And what would your regrets be, you all who are listening, who are thinking about businesses, but you haven't taken the plunge? What will your regrets be working for someone else, doing working their business and not your purposeful business? What will your regret be? Taking that genius and that experience and that skill set that is only yours with you to the grave. You know, it's a big thing to think about. We have a calling. Those of you listening, you have a calling, and it's important to pick it up so that you're not just doing someone else's calling, you know, or doing the calling they think you should do. Right. To thine own self be true. So we have you all, those of you who come regularly to listen. I appreciate you. I appreciate the support. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're building it out. And it is youtube.com/Dr. Barnsley, BARNSLEYNC. So youtube.com/Dr. Barnsley NC. Please subscribe if you haven't. And we just hit 100 episodes last week, you all, which was so exciting. I'm so excited. And this show for me is about promoting great people doing incredible work in the world so that those of you listening get inspired and you take action, right? You don't just listen, you actually take some action from what you heard today to make a difference in your life and the lives of others. So to also help you do this, we have the freebie vault. And you all, that is a huge vault of all sorts of gifts from our guests. I'm going to give you the address. It is bit.ly/free from Dr. B. So let me say that again, bit.ly/free from Dr. B, which is DRB. And I'm going to put it up here too. So what you do is you just go in there, and at the top, you will see our incredible sponsors, our VIP sponsors right there. Make sure you get their gifts. And then you'll be able to scroll down and access the gifts of all the guests on the show. And you all, there are ebooks, there are templates, there are checklists to help you run your business better. There are articles, there are free sessions, there are courses, there's all sorts of stuff there. And Drew, you're going to give something too. So what are you giving for the freebie vault?
Well, my book is basically if you often want to do something and instead of saying yes, you say no, or you don't want to do something and you say yes instead of no. I'm giving my book for a free PDF download of my book called I'll Have What She's Having, Memoir of a Reformed People Pleaser.
Wow.
So.
Oh, I love it. I love the title. I'll have what? Did you say it again?
I'll have what she's having. And a lot of people think it's the movie, but it wasn't. But it's I'll Have What She's Having, Memoir of a Reformed People Pleaser. The reason I started the top part, I'll Have What She's Having, is because anytime I would be at a restaurant with a woman, I would know I'd want the steak. The waitress would go to the woman, what would you like? She'd say salmon, chicken, whatever. Sir, what would you like? I want to say steak. And I say, oh, you know what? Salmon sounds good. I'll have what she's having. And I bite my tongue. Why didn't I say I wanted to, maybe they'll like me better if I like what they like. We have something in common. Not a healthy thing to do. So I'm reformed now.
So now when you go on a date, you just order a bunch of chitlins and you sit there and eat them. And you order you just go and you order like calamari and you just eat it with your hands, and
buffalo wings, all messy.
Buffalo wings, and you get oh yes, I had a date with buffalo wings. That was hilarious. But I was like laughing because I had it all over my face.
I love it.
Yeah, gotta be real.
Be who you are, man, because I'll tell you, people pleasing is I believe malicious intent, even though you don't think so, because you're pretending to be somebody else.
Yeah, and then
for somebody to like you.
Then they like you because they think you're that person, and then they find out who you are, and it's like,
we
have nothing in common.
Yeah.
Gotta be you. Gotta be you. And that's so true. Drew, I had to get used to the fact that it is good to repel certain people in life and business. It is good to
Mhm.
repel certain people in life and business. And,
True.
it was something that one of my teachers used to say a lot. And I was like, oh God, no, no. But I agree. And I've
Mm.
become way more comfortable with that. So I would say to everybody listening, as much as you know what you want, the kind of person you want to work with, the kind of person maybe you want to be, the kind of person you want to live with, if you want a romantic relationship, whatever, think about those things, right? But also think about, who do you not want to be? Who do you
Mhm.
not want to live with? Who do you not want to work with? Because those answers can be just as instructional.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's where we get
Yep.
those non-negotiables, right?
Absolutely. Yep. Mhm.
Non-negotiables, baby,
Yep.
right there.
Mhm.
Well, Drew, it has been a joy to have you here. I really appreciate and laud your vulnerability. I see you as a leader of men and women, but especially
Mhm.
as a leader of men,
Yeah.
so that men can actually really get in touch with their pain and
Mhm.
then begin to use that and feel it and let it go,
Absolutely.
and for all people, I think the struggle you've walked through with your family and more recently with your son, and turning that into the caregiver coach, really refining your message into that, is amazing. So
Thank you.
congratulations on that.
Thank you, Dr. Barnsley.
Yeah. And for those of you listening, maybe today you don't feel like a bold badass. I'm going to share a secret. Sometimes I don't feel like a bold badass either, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes I cry. Sometimes I want to tear my hair out. Sometimes I want to, get in my car, roll up the windows and scream. Maybe you don't feel like a bold badass right now, but I assure you that you are, or you would not be tuning in with us on the Bold Badass Business Show. So get yourself up, dust off your shoulders. Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. Get yourself back up and keep going, because somebody needs your message
Mhm.
today.
Mhm.
This is Dr. Barnsley Brown. Thank you again, Drew, for coming. The Bold
My
Badass Business
pleasure.
Show. I'll see you all next Friday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific. Go make a difference.